If this isn't your first RPG with a crafting system, but you're curious on like when you should start crafting and what materials you should be hanging on to, then this video is for you. We'll start with a quick overview of the crafting system itself, and then we'll jump into some of those finer points. Let's check it out. So the forging system is the real crafting system in this game. We'll kind of use these belts as an example. The rejuvenating nomad belt of frost. The main thing that the crafting system focuses on are these affixes around items here. So there's a few things to note when we're looking at an item like this. The +5 potion slot right below the title of the item, that's the implicit of an item. Those are generally static and can't be changed. But the things that we do have control over are the affixes on the item. So those are the prefixes and the suffixes. Prefixes are at the top, and they have this little golden arrow like preceding them, and suffixes are below the prefixes, and they have a little blue arrow on the right side. So in this case, our prefixes are 18% increased mana regeneration, our suffixes are 29% cold resist, and 25% endurance threshold. The system is clever in that it kind of limits what you can do on these items, but it gives you quite a bit of control on how you can kind of steer them. We don't have total control, but we have some control. The most basic case is we can add new affixes to items that are missing them. Every item can generally have 4 affixes. The prefixes are represented here, the suffixes are represented here. We'll just do a base case. We'll add an affix to our missing prefix slot. We'll just do increased chance to find potions. This is really all there is to it. We have 6 affix shards, and it's going to use one of those affix shards to put this affix on this item. You'll note that this item has 24 forging potential, and then this is going to cost 1 to 18 of that forging potential. Forging potential is basically just the amount that you can craft with an item. Once that forging potential is depleted, we can't take any more crafting actions on it, so it's kind of like the crafting bar that will tick down over time. But let's just go ahead and do this. We're going to add our chance to find potions. So it's worked. We've added 1, used a little bit of forging potential. We've gone down to 17 possible left. That cost us 7 to use. We can also upgrade the tiers on items. So let's say like we wanted to increase our mana regen. We have 11 of this shard right now. So all we have to do is click this button. It'll plop it in here. And then we click the upgrade affix button. It'll notch up the tier of our mana regen affix on this item. I'll talk a little bit about these affixes and which ones you should be looking out for versus which ones you can comfortably spend. In general, you can be pretty loose with your affixes. There are some that are a little bit more scarce, and you might want to save them for endgame items, not burn them on those earlier items that you're likely to be replacing. The things to be looking out for there are really like plus to skill affixes. So there are affixes which will just increase your skill rating, and then there is a hybrid health affix that is pretty rare that you'll want to be keeping an eye out for as well. There's actually this really useful tool on lastepochtools.com. I'll have a link to this in the video description. But it's a table of all of the item prefixes and all of the item suffixes that'll drop all of the possible shards that'll drop on items and their rarity. So what you can do is you can just look at this giant list and you can sort them by reroll chance, and you can also filter. So let's say, for example, we wanted to add mana regen to this item, but we didn't have a lot of these affixes, or we were unsure if we should save them for later. We can come over to our spreadsheet here. Again, this is a prefix because it's on the left side. We'll go to the prefixes, and then we'll just type mana regen. And then, yeah, we can see here the mana regeneration prefix is common, so we'll probably get a ton of those in endgame. We'll be getting those on a lot of items as they drop. If we run out of them, we can modify our loot filters and get a bunch more really quick, so we can probably spend those mana regen affixes without too much concern. But let's say we instead wanted to put the mana and mana regen affix on it. It's a little bit rarer, so we wanted to save it. And again, you can kind of go through this list. If you have a build in mind or something and it has items listed with certain affixes, you could kind of do a quick pass on those and see which of them are rare and which are more common. And the common ones, as you level up, it's probably safe to use those and upgrade the items that you're getting, upgrade the tiers. And that's kind of all you really need to know about the shards themselves. Again, there is some nuance to this, but that's the core of it. If you've been playing the game at all, you probably know there's a couple additional layers to this system. There is the rune system, and there is the glyph system. So we'll start with the rune system. The rune system has a few tools in it to kind of give us a little bit more control of our items here. The ones that you should be worrying about early game are primarily the rune of shattering, the rune of refinement, maybe the rune of removal, and maybe the rune of shaping. So the rune of shattering is the big one. So let's say like we were out of mana regen shards, for example, but we wanted some more. We could take another item from our inventory. So let's plop this one out and we'll throw this other belt in here. This other bell also has mana regeneration. It's like, again, say we just needed more of these shards. What we can do is we can put a Rune of Shattering in here, shatter this item, and there's a chance that it'll give us some Rune of Regeneration shards. It's not going to give us all of them, but there's a chance that it will. These runes aren't very precious either. You can actually even always just like go to a vendor right here, and they'll have some for you, and you can just like buy and top off as you go. You're probably not going to run out of Runes of Shattering as long as you don't run out of money. And in endgame, you'll be having a surplus of both, so you can generally shatter as much as you want. Don't worry about it too much. Alternatively, instead of using a Rune of Shattering, let's say there was a really rare affix on this item that we wanted to pull off and to just save it for later. The Rune of Removal is kind of like a stronger Rune of Shattering. It removes a random affix on an item, returns all of the shards, and doesn't destroy the item. So let's say, again, this were like a super rare affix and we wanted to ensure we got it. We could use the Rune of Removal until we get that affix off of the item, and then use it on whatever item we want to upgrade or infuse with that affix. These are a lot more rare, and you can potentially run out of forging potential while you're using them. So something to keep in mind, maybe hang on to the Runes of Removal unless you really need to. You can always just take the item that has that rare affix and put it in your stash for later, and keep it for when you have more of these. As far as the other runes, Rune of Discovery puts random affixes on everything. It's kind of niche, doesn't have a ton of utility. The Rune of Shaping re-rolls all the implicits. So we talked about the implicits on items earlier. Those are those top kind of attributes plus 5 potion slot in this case. Can be handy, but again, those are a little bit rarer, so probably save those for later. Runes of Ascendance you could use early if you have a particular build in mind and you have a unique that you're going for, because what the Rune of Ascendance is going to do is change the item that it's used on into a unique item. It'll always be the same type and it'll be rolled randomly, so you could do it right away if there are specific uniques that you need, but if you're looking at a build guide or something, the guide will usually call that out. It'll be like, use Rune of Ascendance to try to find these things. Don't just use these willy-nilly unless you have something in particular you're going for. Yeah, and then let's talk glyphs. So these, again, are introduced pretty early. Glyphs of Hope are probably the simplest. All they do is make it so the outcome of a craft is less likely to impact your forging potential. So as you craft with an item, it's less likely that this forging potential number will go down. If you have an item that you're upgrading and you think you're going to try to upgrade it as much as you can, it's usually worth it to use these Glyphs of Hope. They're not super rare. They're a little bit more rare, but you'll get an adequate number of them as you level. So if you're, kind of being mindful of that, if you don't think you're going to upgrade an item a ton, maybe don't burn the glyphs on it. But if it's a pretty good drop and you want to kind of hone it in, it's usually a good idea to go ahead and invest the Glyphs of Hope. The Glyphs of Chaos are interesting. So this is like where the crafting system kind of opens up a little bit. What the Glyphs of Chaos will do is they'll randomly change the affix when you use it into a different affix. Let's just do a quick example. We'll use a Glyph of Chaos on the mana regen, which we just upgraded. So we'll do this, it'll upgrade and re-roll it to something else. So it was mana regen, now it's minion health regen. Now, something to keep in mind with these Glyphs of Chaos is that in order to upgrade an affix off of an item, you need that affix shard. So like, I'm not running a minion health build at all, so you'll note I only have one minion health regen shard because I haven't been picking these up. But I need one if I wanted to roll this minion health regen off. I still need one, even with the Glyph of Chaos. I need one to get the minion health regen affix off of this item. So that kind of puts you in an interesting spot where you almost want a couple of like every affix shard to help you re-roll these off of your better items. So maybe modify your loot filters accordingly, or if you keep running into one where you don't have it and you need it, you can go and, keep an eye out for those items. This shouldn't be impacting your like minute-to-minute play too much, but do keep in mind that it's not a bad idea to try to get like a decent number of all of the super common affixes. So when you get an affix you want to replace that affix with, you can do so. That's most of it. So there are a couple other glyphs here. These you generally want to save for end game. The Glyph of Order will make it so that an affix will stay in its current range within the tier it's in. So like if we look at this item and we hold the Alt key to pull up the tiers, you can see that the minion health is at tier 4 and it's in range 36 to 60 with plus 50. So it's like kind of in the upper half of the range. So if I wanted to keep myself at that minion health, like 50 in that range, I could use a Glyph of Order to ensure that I get a decent roll on the resultant upgrade. But again, those you probably want to save unless you have a really good roll on an item and you want to ensure you have it. Again, I've got a few of them already, so you probably won't run out if you're using them somewhat sparingly. And then glyphs of despair are for like sealing an affix in place. Those you definitely want to be saving for endgame. Like, just wait on these. You'll understand this by the time you get to it, but essentially it like moves this affix into a different slot so it can't be modified further. But again, you don't want to use those. And then the glyph of insights, this last grayed out one here, and it's got to do with like experimental items, I believe, so don't worry about that one early game at all. Yeah, and I think that is a decent overview of where to start. If you have any questions beyond that, especially early game or like in how to set up your filters or anything, there's tons of guides online. Also, feel free to hop in the Discord. I'm usually around answering questions for people. You can catch me live on stream as well. If I'm available, I will definitely help if I can. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Take it easy, and I'll catch you guys next time.